The pub sign is like public artwork. It is seen by thousands and thousands of people every day. As far as I know, we are the only pub sign company in Britain, or pub sign artists, that actually work from licensed premises.
Bob Russell is a sign artist. He lives with his wife Sandy in the 16th century John's Cross Inn near Hastings in Sussex.
The origin of John's Cross was the fact that it was a marshalling point for crusaders. They gathered here on top of the hill. In those days, the bottom of the valleys were very boggy. They couldn't get their troops and horses through them, so they travelled along the ridges. They met here under the banner of John of Jerusalem. This was the marshalling point, before travelling down the hill to Robert's Bridge. Because in those days, the River Rother was navigable all the way up to here. Which is absolutely amazing when you look at the small stream it is today. You wouldn't even get a rowing boat up there. It was at one stage used as a recruiting office for the Napoleonic Wars. It was actually also used during the same wars towards the end of the war to feed the orphans and widows of those killed in the wars. The building was constructed in 1511. Although licences were not required, or permission wasn't required from the authorities. Somewhere around, I think it was 1562, Edmund Spicer is actually reported as having licence as an alehouse. And essentially what happened in those days, ale was brewed on the premises.
This is how pubs began. Saxon women were the home brewsters, selling off any surplus ale to visiting friends and neighbours. By the 18th century, alehouses became public houses, the pub being the publican's home, and the public his guests. This host-guest relationship makes the public house a uniquely British institution. While Sandy is the licensee, Bob works in a studio behind the pub, looking across the Sussex Weald.
Many, many years ago, more years than I care to remember, I studied fine art at Somerset College of Art. I then discovered, I'm not sure which sequence was right, girls and alcohol both required money. I could see no way of a young art student making any money, so I went into business. In fact, into corporate management in the diamond trade, which I survived for 25 years. And it must be, oh God, how long ago? 8 or 9 years ago, I thought, I need a life. What can I do? I'm old and grey and, you know. So I packed that in and started this business. It's funny because I think one of the biggest influences in my life was my great-grandfather. He was a very, very good landscape artist. In fact, I've got some of his works, and I've even got a photograph of great-granddad sat at his easel in 1896, a very, very early photograph, which I use to remind myself sometimes when I get stuck. I do not like things that are temporary and transient. I don't want to waste my life doing things that are thrown away in a couple of years' time. It's no different from building a house. You've got to put the foundations in. If the timber's not properly treated, you'll end up with actually a very good case in point, which is not one of ours, the sign over there, the White Hart. It probably looked superb when it was first installed, but it's actually painted on hardboard. Now, for an external sign, it's a stupid way of cutting cost. The lovely thing about pub signs is the range and diversity. Pub names cover virtually every aspect of history, of geography, right across the board.
As well as 13th century crusaders, the inn has more recent historical connections. Today, a group of enthusiasts have travelled up from Hastings to celebrate their literary hero, Robert Tressell. Derek Norcross, one of the organisers, explains.
Robert Tressell's book, The Ragged Trousered Philanthropists, influenced me as a 14-year-old many years ago, and I can honestly say it affected my whole life. You know, it absolutely changed my attitude and understanding of what life was truly about being fair to everybody. So I suggested this year we came to Hastings and looked at the work of Tressell, and what better idea, in fact, than reenacting the Beano. And the Beano is a chapter in the book where these poor working men who worked a 56-hour week and on Saturdays worked till 1 o'clock, and they came out here once a year and they really did have a Beano. In the book it's called the Queen Elizabeth pub, but in reality it's here where we're standing now with this absolutely glorious view last Saturday in August every year, and they really look forward to that, and they paid the money in, and then what was left of the money they distributed amongst themselves later, and a great cheer went up if it was quite a bit of money, because of course they lived a tremendously hard life, these people. And Tressell was the first man to actually manage to put into words the plight of the working man. You could say, in a sense, that was the first step towards a welfare state, that book. How many it sold, heaven only knows. And when you think about when he wrote it in Hastings, which he called Mugsborough, hasn't changed, and he wrote that in about 1908 to 1910, and then in 1911 off he went to emigrate to Canada because he was disillusioned. You know, he couldn't earn enough money, there weren't enough opportunities, there was unemployment, and he left his Kathleen, his daughter, behind, and off he went to go to Canada. And in Liverpool he contracted pneumonia, died, and was actually buried. This man who wrote this wonderful manuscript was buried in a pauper's grave. Just doesn't seem right. And when the book was published in 1914, what did the family get for it? £25.
And when you go from Sussex, wherever you...
Reg Johnson is a celebrity here today. He married Tressell's granddaughter, Joan.
Of course, one of the extraordinary things is that as we are here, and the studio behind me, a signwriter studio, is precisely the skill that Robert Tressell had, because he was a highly skilled signwriter, and in fact much of his work was in Hastings. Sadly, of course, one of the best specimens was in St Andrew's Church, and I remember dashing down there one day having been told that they were demolishing the church, and I just arrived too late, the thing had gone. So what a shame that this extraordinary man's work was then demolished. But there's still a lot remaining, and certainly his memory will live forever.
One of my missions in life is to promote this craft. I think it's important. Well, it's important to me, perhaps not to anyone else, to think that something's up there. Not only in your time, your children's time, but your grandchildren's time, makes it worth doing, and makes it worth doing right. I think the only way to be good at anything is to have a little old-fashioned thing called passion. If you have a passion for doing it, I believe with experience you get better and better. Without passion, nobody's good at anything.